Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this evening to our Faith in Marriage 2022. First time we've had one in 3 years, so it's really exciting, and Dr Robert Haddad has kindly agreed in 2020, 2021 and now 2022 to be our guest speaker, to speak on the topic of living marriage, living faith, ideas to inspire your children. And this idea really came from the last Faith in Marriage seminar we had. We, as you would have come in, we gave you evaluation sheets. We did the same when we had the last one, and we asked people what they wanted. There was an overwhelmingly clear message that people wanted to know about how they can keep their children engaged in the faith, particularly when they get to those teen years. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Robert Haddad. He holds a qualification in law, theology, philosophy and religious education, including an MA in theology and a PhD. Robert has authored various books, including Lord of History series and many others. There's a number of them on the back table. You're very welcome to peruse them at the end or even purchase them. Since 1990, Robert has worked at St Chabel's College, the University of Sydney Catholic Chaplaincy, the Confraternity of Christian Doctrine, the Catholic Adult Education Centre, the Centre for Thomistic Studies, and the Lume Verum Apologetics. In 2014, Robert was awarded an Australia Day Award by Australia Day Council of New South Wales for his overall contribution to education. And in 2020, the Dempsey Medal by Archbishop Anthony Fisher for his work in evangelisation. Currently, Robert is the manager, Network Catholic Identity for Sydney Catholic Schools, with responsibility for staff faith formation, family evangelisation, youth ministry in 152 primary and secondary schools in the Archdiocese. So with no further ado, I'd like you to join with me to welcome Dr.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and more importantly, thank you for the invitation. It's been a long time coming.
Yes.
I got the invitation over 2 years ago, and in 2020 it was cancelled because of COVID, and 2021 cancelled because of COVID, and 2022 is still affected by COVID. I arrive and I'm told 6 people have given apologies because they've come down with COVID, but we'll press on nevertheless. Very important topic, and a very hard one, really. I've heard topics like this. I've attended talks where people talk about, how to have a great marriage, and how to raise your children in the faith. And 2 things I realised with those talks is that I come away feeling guilty and inadequate. And the speaker always gives a whole list of things of what we should be doing. Hence, I realise I'm not doing all those things. I leave feeling inadequate and somehow, not the father or the husband I should be. Unfortunately, I'm going to do the same to you tonight. But I just preface this. Everything I tell you tonight about marriage or raising children is in the realm of the ideal. Not the impossible, the possible, but in the ideal. Do I live up to everything I'm going to tell you tonight? The answer is no. I put this together in 2 different sessions, and when I went through it myself, I realized, oh gosh, I don't do that, and I don't do that. I do that, and I do that, and I do that somewhat, and I do that a little bit, but I don't do that, etc., etc. So the message here today is that how can I leave tonight at least inspired to go another level higher or another level better? Okay, we're not perfect, we're all imperfect, and we all fail in one way or another. We need to embrace that, but at the same time aspire to be the better, right, or the more perfect. So, talking about faith and marriage, I just want to make some general comments about marriage per se. And I don't need to tell you, it's quite obvious for all of us that marriage is under great stress today. In fact, marriage is really, in the culture we're living in today in the Western world, more than under stress, it's under attack. The younger generations are not marrying anymore. They don't believe in marriage. They don't believe in the permanency of marriage. They don't believe that marriage is exclusive, and they don't believe that marriage really is for raising and educating children for God. The stat I'm about to give you illustrates this without me being precise. It's something I remember from the CARA website in the United States. It's run by Georgetown University, a Catholic university in Washington, publishes stats about the health or otherwise of the Catholic Church in the United States. 1970, there were well over 400,000 marriages, Catholic marriages in Catholic churches in the United States. In 2020, that number was only around 130 to 140,000. Yet the Catholic population is much bigger today, at least nominally, than it was in 1970. That illustrates my point. The younger generations are not believing in marriage anymore. So when I hear about young people marrying, it's a cause of great joy, or it should be for us. Something great is happening somewhere. And I'm even more overjoyed if I know that these young people are choosing to marry in the church because they believe in God, they believe that marriage is sacred, they believe it's been restored by Christ, they believe it's a sacrament, and they believe that it is ordered towards the husband and the wife aiding each other as a partnership to assist each other to get to heaven and to raise children for the same. And believing that children are gifts of God. That's what the Psalm says, Psalm 127. We don't believe that anymore. Our culture deluges us with the opposite. Children are an optional extra if you so wish. But we don't have any issue with contraception, with abortion, or any other activity that will prevent or eliminate life in the womb. Now, just know this one point, this slogan that I like to use: God is in conception, not in contraception. All right? God is not present in contraception, but he is certainly present in conception. Another thing we have forgotten today. Am I here to give marriage advice? Well, if my wife was sitting in the front row hearing me give marriage advice, the talk will be disrupted repeatedly by laughter. Okay? Because I'm good on the theory, but not necessarily that good on the practice. I don't think I'm alone in that regard. I try and I renew every day. So we do our best. But I just say this about marriage and success in marriage. And I do have my good moments and my better moments. My good or better moments is when I remember that the secret to success in marriage is unselfishness. Most people get married with this mindset. I'm marrying her, pretending it's me speaking. I'm marrying her because she's going to make me happy. She's gorgeous, she's beautiful, I love her personality, right? I'm attracted to her, and I know she's going to make me happy. And she's probably thinking something similar. I'm marrying that guy because he's going to make me happy. He's handsome, he's strong, he's a hard worker, right? He'll protect me. I know I'm using binary language, but I don't care because I'm a strict binary anyway. Okay. And I'm marrying him again because he's going to make me happy. That's how people normally think. Am I putting a cross next to that thinking? No, but I'm not going to give it full marks. This is what gets full marks. I'm marrying her because I want to make her happy. I'm marrying him because I want to make him happy. So if we go into a marriage with the mindset that I'm going to exist for her and my children, to serve, to sacrifice, and to suffer for her, and likewise, her for me, and for our children. That's the best, guarantee of a happy marriage. Now, this is hard. This is very hard. You're thinking, I've never thought that way. I've never acted that way. Well, join the human race, because humans generally don't act that way. One of the biggest issues with fallen human nature is original sin and the inversion of love. We love ourselves above all things. We don't love God above all things. We don't love our neighbour above all things, as ourselves. And we don't love our enemies as ourselves. So that's the biggest issue in humanity because of original sin. That's why Jesus came with the solution. Love God with all your mind, body, heart and soul. Love your neighbour as yourself and love your enemies. That's the solution. But this isn't easy. And this isn't natural. And this can only be done by God's grace, enlightening us, strengthening us, moving us to love unselfishly. Now I'm going to be very, very traditional here and controversial. Marriage is a partnership. That's not what is controversial. Marriage is a partnership. That's how St. John Paul II framed it, right? The family partnership. I still believe in the headship of the male. That'll get me in trouble in a lot of places. But I also believe in the heartship, the heartship of the wife. Headship and heartship. Just in the human body, you cannot exist just if you had a brain and no heart. And you could not exist if you just had a heart and no brain. There's a partnership between your heart and your brain and vice versa. And for successful marriages, there must be this partnership. Of course, in the headship, that doesn't mean that the woman doesn't have a head and doesn't think, and vice versa, that the man doesn't have a heart and doesn't care. They do. But God made us different. But God made us different so that we'll be complementary. The differences cause us to find mystery in each other and to desire each other and to find completion through each other. So the heart tempers the head. Headship, also understood properly, St. Paul, Ephesians 5. That is where we read about the headship of the husband. Ultimately, the headship of the husband lives itself out in sacrifice. Because St. Paul there relates how the headship of the husband should be like Christ's headship of the church. And what was Christ's headship like? It wasn't a brutal, violent, oppressive, demanding, dictatorial headship. It was a loving, sacrificial headship for the sake of others. That's how headship should operate in marriage. Of course, as I said, the male and the female both have these two qualities within them. It's just that, there's a bit more emphasis with respect to the male and headship and to the female with heartship. Right. And also, between the husband and the wife, we can't expect that they both have exactly the identical spirituality. They are still two separate people within this partnership, this one flesh. And they still have their distinct personalities and likes and interests. And they have their distinct spirituality. I wish sometimes my wife was more like me in the spirituality. Not that I have a right to demand that, I don't. My wife has her type of spirituality, suitable for her. And she won't change, nor should she change because I demand it. No. We are different people. I have my spirituality and she respects it and she gives freedom for that. And she has her spirituality and I thank God for that. She has grown in recent years, but not through my influence, but through the influence of some of my children on her. Because in a sense, Nazareth syndrome operates in my home. You know what Nazareth syndrome is? Nazareth syndrome is you're not a prophet in your own home. Now, Jesus was the ultimate victim of Nazareth syndrome. He was not a prophet in his own home of Nazareth. In fact, they grabbed him, they tried to throw him over a cliff. Right? If they didn't listen to him, they don't listen to prophets in their own home. And sometimes I'm not a prophet in my own home. And we have to just eat humble pie about that. So when I'm a little bit sneaky or cheeky and I want my wife to do something spiritual, I just whisper to one of my sons to have a chat with her. And she'll readily accept it if it comes from one of them, rather than me. So I see her now doing First Friday devotions at the church, St. Joseph's Moorebank, because my oldest son recommended that. I didn't ask him to do that, but I rejoice in that. And she will grow in her own way, organically, in her own time, and freely, without force or coercion. All right. We never go to sleep angry, or at least the first thing we do in the morning is say good morning. That's a golden rule. Never go to sleep angry between the husband and the wife. But it happens. And sometimes you don't reconcile before you go to sleep. But at least the next morning, at least I can say this about myself. At least every morning I still say good morning. And I try to rebuild from that. Because marriage life really is a continuous series of restarts, of recommitments. I don't believe there's any marriage in the world, maybe only one marriage in world history, Our Lady in St. Joseph, where there was that beautiful peace and tranquility throughout, over the course of the whole life of the marriage. Every marriage has its ups and downs, bumps and bruises, and, crashes even. But one thing we must never stop, never give up on, is the recommitment, is the restart and rebuilding. Because that's always possible. This is why it's important to reintroduce in education with young people the sacredness of marriage, the sacramentality of marriage, and the permanency of marriage. You'd be laughed at today if you go out on the street campaigning to abolish divorce. If you want to be a politician and you're out there campaigning, I want to reintroduce laws that abolish divorce, you'll be laughed out of town. You'll be taken to the edge of the hill like Jesus was at Nazareth, and you'll be thrown off. And you'll suffer incredible ridicule in the media, all media, and social media to boot. But we need to restore in education, whether in the home, in the parish, in the school, that marriage as Jesus taught it. He who divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery. We've forgotten that. We call ourselves Christians, we call ourselves followers of Jesus Christ, but we've forgotten that teaching. It's inconvenient teaching. But we need to recreate a new generation or generations of people who believe this. And they search for marriage, and when they search for marriage, they need to find someone who likewise believes that. There's no guarantees in marriage, but you got more likelihood of a successful marriage if you are marrying someone who believes that marriage is meant to be permanent until death, exclusive, permanent, and until death. And open to the natural possibility of life. If I'm sounding radical, it's not my fault. I'm just trying to be faithful and follow and teach what Jesus Christ taught. What I'm saying now would have been just accepted as normative 70, 80, 100, 200 years ago. What has changed is the culture. And it's not accidental. It's deliberate. It's been changed deliberately over those hundreds of years. Concerted effort, covert or overt, by many organisations, individuals, politicians, governments, whatever, over the centuries. All right. I'm going to move on to the next thing. Ideas to inspire your children. Living faith in the marriage, inspiring your children, the hardest task in the world today. Because you've got competition. Everyone wants to influence our children. Everywhere. The television, the radio, the magazines, the social media in all its forms, you know, the TikToks, the Instagrams, the YouTubes, right? The Facebooks. Everyone wants to tell our children what they should believe, how they should live, how to find happiness in the world. Of course, separate and apart from God, separate and apart from Jesus Christ, separate and apart from the church and its teachings on morality. Right, I'm about to break my important rule and give you a point-by-point outline of recommended must-dos. Do I perfectly follow these? The answer is no. But one advantage about being a teacher, you run the risk of being a hypocrite. We also, in teaching, we help ourselves to remind ourselves of what I should be doing, to help lift my own game. Now, as parents, we all know that we are the first educators. I work in Sydney Catholic schools and we say that all the time. Parents are the first educators. We just exist as a school system to assist parents in their primary role as first educators. As first educators, you are responsible for raising your children, and also that includes getting others to help. There's some heroic people out there, significant number, who are homeschoolers and want to do it all themselves and just get the assistance of other homeschoolers to form a community. And that's heroic. And God bless them. But that doesn't mean other ways are invalid necessarily. I'm not a homeschooler. I admire it. I tick off on it. I have great respect for those who do it. They're heroes. But I'm not a homeschooler. And there are more ways than one to skin a cat. All right? But as parents, whether we are using others or asking others to assist us in raising our children or not, there is still some obligation we can never totally pass on to others. The big thing about passing on the faith today, in my view, a lot of young people aren't interested in the faith because it's dead boring. We make it dead boring. I hear it all the time. Mass is boring. Religion at school is boring. Religion at school is the joke subject. I hear it all the time. As a Catholic educator, I'm traumatized by that. We spend billions of dollars a year to get what? What's the outcome? With the billions of dollars that we're given by the governments and get from fees, and what's happening? There's still many good people in the system doing good things though. Don't think it's all bad. We have to make faith exciting for young people. We have to make it an adventure, not just a series of routine actions. There's a great story there relating to creation, goodness, fall, sin, fall, and God's rescue plan through Jesus Christ. And all the great heroes of the Old Testament, the prophets, some of the kings, some of the priests, leading up to Jesus Christ, and all the great heroes since with the apostles and martyrs and doctors and fathers of the church and saints and the heroes throughout the century. We've got to reignite the excitement of wanting to be followers of Jesus Christ. And we cannot do that without us as parents being seen by our children to live that exciting life and doing the right thing. Integrity from our part as parents is an absolute. Now, I've taught enough in schools and I've taught enough cynical year 9s to know that they see right through you. If you're teaching the best things in the best way, but they know you're not living it, that you're a hypocrite, you're a flat tire in the classroom. And the same goes for us as parents. If our children see us teaching or preaching or exhorting them to do this, believe that, or whatever, and we're not, we're going to get nowhere. Especially with fathers. One stat that I gave a young teacher a few months ago is that, and this is a stat that's probably consistent throughout the Western world, where you have a family and the father is practicing the faith, it's a 90% chance, I've heard different numbers, say 73 or 90, but still very high, that the children are going to practice the faith as well. But where the father is not practicing the faith, that percentage drops to 17%. So what responsibility both parents have, but in this case, this is a stat about the role of dads. You know, we've got to do the basics right. Are we following the commandments in front of our children? Are we always people who tell the truth, who are honest, who don't use bad language? Are we parents who are seen going to the sacraments, especially confession? This is important. My dad used to go to Mass, not often. My dad believed in prayer and prayed. My dad wanted us to be followers of Jesus Christ, but I never saw my dad ever go to confession. I'm not judging him. I hope he died well. He died suddenly, heart attack, at the age of 58, 34 years ago. But I never saw him go to confession. We need to be parents to be seen by our children going to confession, going to the sacraments. We need to be parents who are praying in front of our children or seen by our children to be praying. You're not praying in front of your children to show off, but they need to see you modeling what you want them to do. Family prayer, of course, is so critical here. Some families do it very well. Many families I know do it better than my family. All the members of my family pray, but we don't necessarily and often get together as a family and pray. But we do as individuals, each one of us prays to different degrees. It's great if children see their parents not just going to the sacraments, not just praying, but sometimes on their knees praying. Because it teaches them about humility, that my parents are humble. And they really do believe. They really are humbling themselves. They do believe in a God. They do believe in a being that's higher than themselves. Is that Highway to Heaven? There you go.
Sorry.
What is that song? Is it Highway to Heaven?
Stairway to Heaven.
Stairway to Heaven. Sorry, AC/DC was Highway. No, Highway to Hell was AC/DC. And Stairway to Heaven is Led Zeppelin. I get it. All right. Well, yeah, good. Now, what we also have to do somehow is, are we praying before main meals? Do we pray as a family? When we get together as a family, at least I get them to pray before the main meal. Prayer is, I'm emphasising prayer here so much because it's obviously so basic in our faith. But I believe prayer is the glue in the family. You know, you look at a wall, you've got bricks in the wall. You can pile bricks up, you can pile them rather high, but if no cement between each brick, that wall will easily fall one day, and it will fall. Your family might look stable, it might be living together under the same roof, but where's the glue? What is the glue? The glue is prayer in the family. Your individual prayers, but also from time to time, family prayer. Now, different families do it differently. I've met families where they have their family rosary every night. 1998, I did my first speaking tour to Perth. I stayed with a family who hardcore homeschoolers. Husband and wife were like this, 8 children. And they had the family rosary where the 8 children were kneeling in 2 lines on the floor, vinyl floor, in the kitchen. And it was like an army, militant rosary, army formation, led by the mum and the dad. And I was watching this, and you know, I wasn't against it, but I've also got some question marks about that. Tragically, that family, 20 odd years later, has completely fallen apart. It's not because they were traditionalists who prayed the rosary on their knees. It had nothing to do with that, right? But you know, 6 of the 8 kids, as I have been told, don't practice faith anymore. The mum and dad have divorced as well, right? Sad, very sad. There's no guarantees in life, all right? But I sometimes do have question marks about enforced rosaries. I sometimes worry about if you're getting your kids to pray 5 decades a night with you every night, are they really doing it freely? And when they're old enough and feel free enough, they don't just ditch that practice. I pray the rosary at home. I pray it every day at home. My kids see me. I personally have never enforced a family rosary. But my kids, to different degrees, do pray the rosary in their own way. Now, my oldest son, maybe 8, 9 years ago, decided he's going to pray the rosary every day. It was his choice, 5 decades a day. And he found it very hard. And he started crying about it because he kept leaving it to the end of the day, late at night when he was tired. And I had a chat with him about it, and I said, look, why did you choose to do the rosary? He said, I wanted to pray the rosary because I saw you praying the rosary. But it's hard for you now, isn't it? He said, yes, it's very hard. I'm too tired when it's late at night. I said, then stop praying the rosary. Pray just 1 decade a day. Eventually find your level that you're comfortable with at that age. Now he's 22, he's prays the rosary 5 decades a day. He chooses it. He's older, he's stronger. I didn't enforce it, I didn't mandate it. He freely chose it. So the advice here is that let your children freely find their level of prayer. You don't want them to freely choose no prayer, but it's better to give them the freedom, inspire them, pray, but find the level you're comfortable with. Pray the devotions you like, that you want to pray. Of course, there's weekly mass, must be confession from time to time, okay? And we must pray every day, but let them have the freedom to find their level of prayer, rather than mandating your prayer styles and your prayer life as an adult on young children. Because there's some likelihood they'll rebel against that if they feel they're oppressed or their freedom has been denied. Mass attendance. Well, I already said, don't make that optional. Big mistake in the modern age. I'm not going to baptise my children. I'm going to let my children decide for themselves what to believe in. Or I baptise my children, but you know, I'm going to let them decide whether they want to go to Mass or not. Or I want them to go to Mass, but I've given up. He or she won't come out of the bedroom Sunday morning, so I've given up. All right. Well, I might be contradicting myself here to some degree when I say we shouldn't enforce prayer, but when they're very young, we should enculturate them in the fact that Mass is what the Church says, a necessary obligation on the faithful once a week, but we have to turn that from being more than an obligation to help see them the positive reasons, the delightful, wonderful reasons why they should go to Mass. Right? You want to move them to a point where they are freely choosing to go to Mass for positive reasons. Not because it's an obligation, one of the precepts of the Church, which it is, right? But because they want to worship God and they want the Eucharist. They want to be present at Mass and they want the Holy Communion. And ideally, of course, we go to Mass as a family and we sit as a family. But in this day and age, be happy. My children now, the boys are 22, 21, the girls are 17 and 15. So the 22, 21-year-old, they don't necessarily go with mum and dad to Mass. But they go to Mass when they of their own choosing. And they go to Mass more than once a week, thanks God. But they're men now, they'll choose, and I'm happy that they're going to Mass. They don't have to go to Mass with me, but they're going to Mass. My older daughter is moving in that same direction. If she doesn't come with me or my wife or with us to Mass, okay, not ideal. But if she's going to Mass every week and she's choosing to do that freely, wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. All right. In the house, we should from time to time make it known that there are special feast days. We normally just concentrate on Easter and Christmas. But each child has a Christian name. Oh, we got rid of that a few years ago, didn't we? We don't call them Christian names anymore. But know your children's name, and that if it's a Christian name or an Old Testament name, that see what feasts we have in the church. Like, I got a son named Anthony, so we've got Anthony the Great on the 17th of January, and we've got Anthony of Padua on the 13th of June. So we should mention that. My son, our oldest son is Elijah. The Feast of St. Elias is in July. We should make that known. And the Feast of St. Catherine of Siena is 30th of April. My other daughter, Christina, there's a St. Christina. I just forgot. I don't know what her feast day is. And there you see, I'm imperfect in my own advice. All right, but they should be aware of feast days. And very importantly, they should know of stories of the greatest saints. You want to remember my opening point, let's make the faith exciting. And one of the best ways to make the faith exciting is stories of the saints. Because people love stories. They always will. Let's give them stories about the real heroes. There's plenty of false heroes out there that get the story told about them. But they need to know about saints and be excited about their achievements. They don't necessarily imitate them. You know, you don't want to be like St. Simon Stylites, who lived on top of a stone column in Phoenicia for over 30 years by himself. I've been to that spot, I've seen it, right? Okay, but you have to admire why he did that and what was the motivation and what was the spiritual benefits of that, and how he used it as a platform for preaching and teaching to everyone who came past. All right, now we're also in an age where, okay, it's still in the home itself, you know, holy pictures. Now we insist our schools should have holy pictures. That's good, holy pictures. Holy pictures. That's great. It's better to have holy pictures than not have holy pictures. But we should have them in their home. But I remember once I met this young lady when I was trying to get married, and I was over her house, and she was living with her auntie and uncle. And it was here in Australia. And they had plenty of holy pictures, which was good, but the life within the home was not a peaceful home. So having holy pictures and not living a holy life is not a good thing. But it's better to have holy pictures than no holy pictures, because it just creates ambience. Even if it's just subconsciously in the minds of those who live in the home, the young people who live in the home. We also have to promote respect for God and holy names, especially when our young people are watching modern movies today where there's no respect for that. How many movies, since the late 80s now, every movie coming out of Hollywood or Bollywood or Follywood, whatever it is, right, has to have F words in it. Multiple F words. It's like it's compulsory, throw in the F words. We need to corrupt. Keep putting, pile it on. And the blasphemy and misuse of the name of our Lord Jesus. The Divine Praises is a prayer designed by the church to make reparation for blasphemies against God, our Lord, our Lady, and the saints. And our kids watching these popular movies, they're going to hear this blasphemy all the time. We need to counter that by showing respect for the name of God, our Lord Jesus Christ, our Lady, and the saints, the angels, everyone else in the home. To revere the names of saints. All right. Spiritual reading with the children If you've got very young children, it's great. You need to read with them every night. I'm only reading with one of my children at the moment, my 15-year-old, because the others have said, I'm old enough now. Okay? And even my 15-year-old, who's a lovely girl and very pious, is beginning to, oh, Dad, we don't have to read tonight. Okay? All right. Okay. But with your very young children, I think it's compulsory. And promote the idea that they need to do good Catholic Christian reading. And have a nice little Catholic library in the home. I've been to many homes where they got great libraries, all these DVDs and videos, all these other novels and books and fiction. Hundreds, many hundreds of books, videos, DVDs. I'm looking at them, I'm not saying anything. Nothing Catholic here. Nothing religious here. But have a library. You're adults. You should be doing spiritual reading as well. I look at spiritual reading as always our petrol, our oil for the motor, our water for the engine that we need to replenish constantly. You need to be spiritually reading every week for the rest of your life. Do that and then let your kids see that and have a library. Because one day, I got a library, and one day my kids, and it's come true, they go to my own library and they look at it. Oh, that looks interesting. That looks interesting. And they pick the books that they want to read. They're not going to read a Summa Theologica of St. Thomas Aquinas in Latin, okay? But they're going to start with something that is attractive for them. And our conversation should mention God, Jesus, from time to time. Just a casual conversation, God bless you, all right? If God wills. And when I'm in the car, I think one of the best moments for me with my children over the many years is when I'm taking them to school in the car. Those 3 to 5 minutes are the best moments of my fatherhood. Because you've got them in the car and you just talk about, what's special at school today? And you build on that, and then you talk about something relating to the faith or marriage, love, relationships, marriage, okay, prayer, etc., etc. And praying for a safe trip in the car and praying for a safe day at school and a safe return. Our kids live in a world now, postmodern world. They don't know the term postmodern. But a postmodern world doesn't believe in truth. I just read from John's Gospel today, chapter 18, where Pontius Pilate said to Jesus, "What is truth?" And our world is the same today. What is truth? There's no truth. There's no objective truth. Even if there was, we can't discover it. We create our own truth. What's true for you is not true for me, and vice versa. That's why we can create our own genders, as well as our own truth. Because there's no truth. Okay? So we have to promote the idea that there is such thing as good and evil, right and wrong. And that there is truth, and there is falsehood. And we have to be people of truth, people of goodness. And also, not that there's many left, but I had a nice little conversation with one of us before this talk started. We need to, when we're talking to our children and we're trying to give them inspirational figures, we need to show an interest in politics and help them realise that we need to always vote. We have a social and moral responsibility to vote, and always to vote for the best candidate on offer, or the least bad on offer, the lesser of the multiple evils, putting it very radically. But, and that we need to support whatever politician is left that shows remotely any support of traditional Christian/Catholic values. Very few of them left. We do have some. Hopefully we always will have some. But we can't abandon this area. In the home, it's very important that that we are on guard, we are on watch. What's coming into the home? Through the television, through radio, through the internet, or any other means. We just have to have an instinct of overview. Like Adam in the garden was meant to be the watchful guardian of the garden. He slipped up, the serpent came in, we know the rest of the story, calamity. We do need to have a vigilance with what is being watched. I was worried about this more than anything else before I got married. How I'm going to regulate what comes into the home and what our children watch or listen to. How am I going to find the balance so that I'm not neglectful but not tyrannical? Sometimes I have been a bit tyrannical. Turn that off. Turn it off now. You're not watching that, and you know why. Get it off. I have been like that more than once. But what we need to achieve, and what I think, thanks God, I have largely achieved, is that my children self-regulate. They know what dad thinks, what dad wants and doesn't want, what mum wants and doesn't want. And now they understand why. We have to let them understand why they're like that and why they think like that. So they can agree with that. They see the reasoning. You're not going to watch pornography or nudity or rampant blasphemy. This movie is just so off. The other night I'm watching something with my wife. It was a Bollywood movie. And we were just, why? I said, why are we watching this? So many other options. She agreed. She turned it off. And I put on one of my own movies, which she wasn't interested in, and she went to sleep. Okay? But at least she agreed that what we were watching was just, it wasn't up to par. We need to, if we can get our kids to self-regulate so that when they see some junk on television and they turn it off themselves, we can put our thumbs up and say mission accomplished. Yeah, so we've got to be on the watch for particularly the distorted sexuality and the pornography that might come into the home, that will just pollute and destroy. And we've got to make sure that we don't assent or display that culture in ourselves through our own sexual jokes or our own, maybe tendency to look at movies that are, pornographic or semi-pornographic. We also have to be very careful not to be overly materialistic and promote a culture in the home where life is all about this world. Life is all about material comfort and material accumulation. Life is all about money. Because too many families are down that path. Too many families, whether they realise it or not, have made that their chief pursuit, and as a consequence, they wonder why when their children are 14 or 16 or 18, they don't really know them or they've lost control of them. Because they have given too much time to the pursuit of the material at the neglect of the spiritual or the familial. And now that my children are between, the ages of 15 and 22, I, like many other parents, have realised, well, where did the time go? It goes very quickly. And they're adults before you realise it. And we have to inculcate in them that spiritual accumulation is always superior, much more important than wealth accumulation. In all this, it's very hard, very, very hard. And to say it again and again and again, I'm not getting full marks in this test. But the real test for us as parents is how do we attempt to raise our children in a way which is not too strict or too harsh. We cannot bludgeon, verbally attack our children into the faith. Sometimes we can be frustrated and say, you've got to go to Mass. Why aren't you praying? Don't do that. And we do that because we think that's the best way to operate at that moment, in that circumstance. We're behaving that way because we're really well motivated, because we don't want our children to, be growing up without the faith or non-practicing. But does that really work? I don't believe it will ever work. What I've found is that patience is so important here. A certain level of tolerance is so important here. Patience, because time is still on our side. And if you model the faith and you promote it positively, and you always attempt to be nice and gentle with your children, to positively lead them to the practice of the faith, you'll be more successful in the long run. We can't be too strict or too harsh. And what I found to help me was a deepening Sacred Heart devotion, to transform myself in the heart, so that if I need to critique anyone in my family, I do it with love and calmness and patience, and they can see that is my motivation. Because no one, because of our own pride, no one responds to a rebuke that's harsh, to a rebuke that humiliates us, right? We always, in our own pride, we react against it. But we are attracted to something if the rebuke, so to speak, is done with an obvious gentleness and love. So you don't correct your children, you don't attack them into the faith. And another thing that's so critically important is that, and I mentioned this earlier and I reiterate it now, is respecting their freedom. No matter what, we can't take away their freedom. No one took your freedom away when you were growing up. And if they did, it was only temporary. We can't take away our children's freedom. We've got to work with their freedom to lead them, as God does with all of us. With his actual graces, he enlightens us, strengthens us, moves us. He's always working with our freedom, respecting our freedom, not bludgeoning us or compelling us to love, because love without freedom is not love at all. So when I'm talking with them, whether it was subject selection, university course selection, or relationships and future marriage, I've always tried to say, you can do anything you want, so long you can do anything but sin. Anything that's not illegal or immoral or sinful, you can do. I've given them freedom about those issues. My older daughter, who's a big critic of mine when she needs to be, said to me just a few months ago, "You're not like other parents, Dad. You don't force me, you've never forced me to do these electives at school, whether in year 9 and 10 or 11 and 12. I've given them the freedom to choose what subjects they wanted, what courses my boys are doing at university and what my girls will do one. And they appreciate that. And when they realize that you are allowing them to be free and, in a sense, to be adults, they're more open to your positive suggestions. So they're willing to meet you there. Okay, Dad, thank you for giving me the freedom to do whatever I want, and I agree with you. I won't do anything that's immoral, illegal, right? Okay, or sinful. And if we get to that point, again, it's mission accomplished. When it comes to relationships, though, I'm a bit hard line. I do want my children to marry Catholics. And if they meet someone and they fall in love who's not a Catholic, I would want that spouse to be open to accepting Catholicism, to becoming Catholic. Because I believe in the unity of the family. I believe it's critical in raising children that the mother and the father, the husband and wife, are united on matters of faith. Because if they're not, the children are always going to tend to the lower. Well, Dad doesn't go to Mass, so why should I? Dad doesn't pray, so why should I? That's the tendency of human beings, to tend to the lower, more often than not. Also, I think it's what's important, and I'm coming to the end soon. So you've got to have a sense of humour. You can't be this really dour, stern parent. Make jokes. Make jokes about yourself. Make good and positive jokes. There's plenty of jokes out there, but so many comedians want to be immoral in their humour. You can be a great comedian and exercise and practice humour without immorality, but be a funny person. I'm funny at work. People are shocked. I'm always making jokes. Make jokes about yourself. My youngest daughter, who's very nice and sweet though, she hammered me about a month ago. I'm making jokes at home, and it's late at night, she turned on me and said, Dad, and she was serious, Dad, stop it. Your jokes are not funny. Okay. All right, I let it go. I respected it, I accepted it. But I'm still going to make jokes in the future, which will be funny, okay? Now, also, you want to be seen to be normal. Go to movies, go to the football. I talk about football at work, because so many people love football, rugby league or whatever. So I talk about, and I know a lot of principals out in the eastern part of Sydney are Rabbitohs supporters. When I tell them I'm a Rabbitohs supporter, they welcome me into their schools. You know, so yeah, you want to be seen. You can be faithful, absolutely, but be seen as human as well. That you don't give the impression you're just angelic, floating in the air. You don't have any humanity about yourself. But of course, at the same time, avoid obsessions, because I've seen so many people who don't grow up when it comes to sport. It's their whole life. Their whole happiness is determined on whether these young men that they've never met actually put a piece of leather over a white line. Now, I like rugby league, I love it. But we have to not be obsessive about it and export these obsessions to our own children. Now, I know there are people who want to watch the score now. Good luck, God bless you. All right? Okay? But I really mean this. Obsessions are bad. They are imbalanced. Which is why I do regulate. I regulate myself when it comes to watching rugby league, because I have my own dispositions. Okay? If you're a chronic gambler, you tend to avoid gambling if you want to recover. If I get depressed when my football team loses, well, I have to do something to deal with that. So, and you find this strange, and it's got nothing to do with good parenting, it's just me. I make it as a rule that I'll only watch the following games every year. Rugby league test matches, state of origins, and the semi-finals and the grand final. I don't watch the normal rounds, because it's a waste of time. Look at Melbourne last year, plus 499, minor premiers, didn't even make the grand final. Now, I'm radical, I'm extreme, but that's how I cope with obsessions. And back on the point relevant to this topic, we don't want to export sporting obsessions to our children. No obsessions are good. Go on family holidays. Let your children dress fashionably without being immoral. Fashionable but modest. Because sometimes I've seen families, certain families, traditional Catholic families, beautiful families, but there's some implicit rule that kids have to dress as dags. The girls have to have skirts to the ankles all the time. And they're old and dingy clothes. And they're trying to be modest, and modesty is great, phenomenal. Put your thumbs up for modesty. But, you know, you can be fashionable, you can be attractive without being immodest, all right? And God made beauty for a reason. I found what's been very helpful in recent years is my older boys playing a role supporting me as parents, my wife. As I said, my older boys, thanks God, they got it and they help others get it. Their friends, their peers, when they were at school at Cathedral College, at Mary's Cathedral College in the city, with their sisters and with my wife. They assist, and I have sometimes Elio, I bring him, can you tell X this? Can you tell Y this? Can you tell Mum this? Because I know, as I said, Nazareth syndrome. So my dad said this to me about 45 years ago. Raising the oldest properly is so important, because if you get that right, the other kids will more likely be right than not. If you fail with raising the oldest child, you got Buckley's with the rest. That was my dad's advice. And I find that it's critically useful when you've got the older children helping out with the parenting. Now, I've just done what I said I shouldn't do, give you all these points, lists of what we should be doing as good husbands, wives, and parents. And if you're feeling guilty, I apologize. I feel guilty too. If you walk away taking some of this, and some of this helps you, as would help myself to be a better spouse and a better parent, again, mission accomplished. And now I'd just like to end with a question. Who disagrees with anything I have said? I'm happy to have a conversation. All right. God bless you. Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite anybody who wanted to ask a question. You're most welcome to pose a question before we finish up. Invite you all to join us for supper. And look at Robert's books, of course.
Such a great Catholic audience. No one sits in the front rows. You just see it. How atypical. What's wrong with us Catholics? Why do we always want to sit in the back row?
Because we might stand out. People might look at us and whatever.
All right, it's just a joke. You know, I'm only being humorous.
We're tax collectors.
You might see the score of the football.
That's why we're back.
Tax collectors. Okay, I get that. That's good. It's
We're
beautiful.
waiting for somebody to take us to the front row.
Oh, I see the big couple, are we?
Rob,
Yeah.
sorry, Robert, just one question. With parenting, I mean, it's always hard, and you touched on it in regards to coming down too hard on the kids. But, you know, as a parent, like, you know, regular mass is something that we encourage and we do all the time, and the special feast days, we attend masses and stuff. But when is it not too much for them? Because sometimes, you know, you see that the kids kind of fall off, and they see it, and they love it. They love going to church at the moment, thanks be to God. They enjoy it, they're part of the community of the church. But sometimes you do find that they switch off. And in that,
And we all do, don't we? We all have, haven't we?
yeah.
As we were growing up too. Look, you're doing the right thing if you enculturate your children into the normal Catholic practices. You have to be a little bit insistent about the bottom lines. But they have to understand why you're being insistent. Okay? Rules are good, but rules without explanation or understanding or meaning are very oppressive. But if they understand why we go to church every week, yes, the church actually has a precept. And it's how we obey the 10 Commandments. And we need to teach that. But we also need to show the positive side. And I always point to the Eucharist as a positive side. Now, when I was a teacher very early on, go back about 32 years ago, I was very hardline as a teacher. I'll be teaching kids. I broke every rule in the book when it came to Catholic education. And I could get away with it because I was in an independent school where at the age of 25 I was put in charge of RE and assistant principal, which was an extraordinary thing. And I used to tell the kids, you've got to go to Mass every Sunday. If you deliberately miss Mass without good reason, it's a mortal sin. That's how I used to teach. I'll nuance it differently these days. Okay? But still aiming to say the same thing in a positive way and get the same result. And it got back to the principal. And one day I'm having a meeting with the principal, and I'm AP, I'm about 26, 27 years of age. The principal's about 30 years older than me. He said, Robert, you shouldn't be teaching the kids that it's a sin to miss Mass. I said, Father, I'm keeping you in business. And he had nothing to say. It wasn't an angry conversation, it wasn't adversarial. But, you know, I'm not going to be in the business of saying to young people, you don't have to go to Mass. Because that's going to be the quickest way to empty completely what's left of the faithful going to Mass. There has to be some level of obligation, but we've got to move from obligation. Love, perfect love drives out all fear. That's what we read in one of St. John's epistles. Perfect love drives out all fear. So we shouldn't be going to Mass because if I miss out on Mass, it's a mortal sin. If I die in mortal sin, I'm going to go to hell. That's true in the textbook sense. But we've got to move from that as a foundation. You go to Mass out of love. You go to Mass out of goodness. You go to Mass because we want to worship God, because He deserves to be worshipped. He loves us, we should love Him. We've got to go to Mass as a community, because we're one family through our baptism. We've got to go to Mass because there's a gift there we can't get at home. You can pray at home. You can read your Bible at home. You can't get the Eucharist at home. You can't.
The other reason you go to church too is to be thankful for all the things you've been given.
That's right. But if I want to play devil's advocate in response, I can be thankful to God anywhere, can't I? I don't need to go to church to be thankful. But of course, we go to church and we pray our prayers of thanksgiving. Absolutely. You're right there. Okay. So I'm just trying to, we gave up teaching about obligations a long time ago. Are we better off for it? I don't think so. Because if we wanted to rip up the textbooks about obligation, I don't think we replaced it with anything better, really. It's substantive. Yeah.
I'd just like to make a couple of comments. Going to church, receiving the Eucharist, one comment I heard was that receiving Christ to be like Christ. That's one thing. The other thing, a couple of things you mentioned, is regarding names and saints. Nowadays, a lot of the names are given to the children. Summer, Olive, Mercedes, no saints.
It's secularism. We de-Christianising.
That's right.
Everything is being de-Christianised. And this is a relentless momentum that is not accidental. Right? We went through a period in the early centuries of Christianisation, very slow, very prolonged, very painful. But the 4th century was a great century of real acceleration. And then we had the Dark Ages after the fall of the Roman Empire. But then we had the early Middle Ages and the High Middle Ages. And it was just a continuous, slow process of Christianisation. And now we're in a period, which has been going in one way or another, very subtly, for about 700 years or so, where we're de-Christianising, and now we're in a frenzy of de-Christianisation. Secularisation is the new religion. Where is it going to end for us? I'm very fearful about where it's going to end. I think it's going to end where it began, where Christianity is going to be reduced to a persecuted minority. That's what I believe, personally. We're heading that way. I'm going to say something now that will get me sacked and in trouble beyond belief. And one day maybe even put on trial and sentenced for it. Listen to this statement. In God's plan for life and love, sex is only meant to be between a man and a woman in the context of a marriage that's freely entered into, exclusive to all others, lasts until death, and open to the natural possibility of life. How much trouble will that get me into if I said that publicly? How many jobs will I be sacked from? How many phobias will I be accused of? How many courts will I be dragged in front of one day? How many fines will be imposed on me? What I just said is the way of the Lord Jesus. That's what He taught. But that's not welcome anymore in our world. And that's the hardest thing about being a parent in our world today. We don't have the support of society anymore. That's the most frightening thing.
Especially in Kmart now, where they're selling Barbie dolls with 2 men.
You must have a phobia, don't you? But what's a phobia? It's an irrational fear. You don't have an irrational fear. You have a well-ordered reason formed by revelation from God. Right? But really a phobic.
But we can't give our opinions at workplace. You can't give your opinion anywhere because you'll get.
Because inclusion is for everyone except Christianity.
Free speech except for Christian.
If everyone except Christianity.
Even in the
Let's
workplace,
face the reality.
people will look at me because.
Yeah, let's face the reality. Diversity, inclusiveness is for everything and everyone except Christianity. just like it was in the Roman Empire. The Romans were very tolerant when it came to religious observance. That's why they had the Pantheon in Rome. They incorporated all the religions and all the gods of the world into one system, except the God of
What
Israel.
can we do to change this in this society that we're living in now?
Very hard. You just have to be faithful where you are, in your circumstances. I'm reading a book at the moment called Fabiola. It's a novel written in the late 19th century by an English cardinal, Cardinal Wiseman. It's about the conversion of a very noble and very wealthy and powerful young woman named Fabiola. How she came to conversion in the most hostile of circumstances. How did the Christians survive in those times? This is a novel leading up to the Diocletian persecution that began in AD 303, right? Christians mostly behave like you do now. They do silent and secret Christians operating where they were. Fabiola was surrounded by Christians and she didn't know it. In one of her own slaves and other people she knew, but she didn't know they were Christians. But everything she admired in them, she saw that all these people are so noble, so intelligent, so virtuous, but she didn't know it was because of their Christianity. And to her shock and horror, over time, she came to realize that everyone she admired belonged to that hated sect, the sect that she hated. But everyone she knew and even loved belonged to this sect, secretly, for their own preservation. We're heading back to those times. In the end, all these friends as well, I'm up to the section in the book where all of her friends are being arrested, on trial and executed in the most brutal way. I hope we don't end up in that direction.
Funny, we met someone named Fabiola when
Yeah. All right, I'll finish whenever you're ready.
Oh, all right. 1, 2 ladies. And
This
then
lady
we'll
was been
break.
waiting for a while.
Yes,
Yeah.
and this lady, and then we'll break.
We talked about when your children are at home, okay? But how do you do it when your children aren't at home?
Wow.
And they've met spouses that weren't brought up like they were and they decided to choose because they're still living a good life according to them.
Yeah, and this is the hardest thing, my goodness. You know, how can I answer that question? I just thank God for a start that me personally, I haven't experienced that yet. It has happened in the past. It was St. Augustine of Hippo was one of those.
Yes,
What did St. Monica do for 16 years? She was helpless, she was powerless.
Well, that's exactly what I'm
Right.
doing.
St. Augustine had 2 different women in his life. Had a child, a Deodatus, from one of those women. And St. Monica had no support from her husband, Patricius, because Patricius was a pagan. So when you looked at her family, it was rubble and failure. But what was constant in St. Monica? She just prayed every day. She just prayed this, that St. Augustine, her son, would marry the woman he's living with.
Oh, look, I'm not saying to that extent.
I know.
okay? I mean, they're all good kids and.
Yeah, but in the
It's
end-
just that they don't see going to church as important.
I know.
as they brought them up to be.
But
And
in
their
the end,
grandkids are
I know,
missing
and
that.
it's only going to get worse. We just have to, for a start, as I said to this young lady here, you just have to be the person God calls you to be, and she sees that. Ultimately she'll say one day, Mum, you know, I don't live like you, and I don't necessarily agree with you, but I really admire you. That's a good start. And in the end, you never know. You just don't know the future, what will happen. That while she's alive, there's hope. I mean, St. Augustine, what did St. Monica get for her prayers in the end? She didn't get her prayer answered. St. Augustine never married the women he lived with, but he became a convert to Christianity. He became a priest, he became a bishop, became a father of the church, a doctor of the church, and a saint. All right, so her prayers are answered in a different way. Whether your prayers are answered in the way you wish or hope for, in the end, it's between you, God, and your children. Because remember, your children are free. This is the thing we have to grapple with, freedom. And in the end, you can't force your children to do anything. But when you're raising them, you're laying the concrete foundations for hopefully they will freely choose to do what is right. If they don't, there's a radical solution which might be a little bit scary or strange if I said this. If one of my children was left the home and living with someone unmarried, and I would not be happy with that, my prayer would be, God, lead that child to a position where they find no happiness in their situation. Let them be unhappy in that situation and realize that they followed the delusion and come back one day to do what is right. I had an example of a student I taught, class of 06. I used to talk a lot about sex, drugs and rock and roll culture and the dangers thereof. And he left, went to Notre Dame, studied law, graduated, became a lawyer, but then he went to another business. And from the age of 20 onwards, he got into the sex, drugs culture. And he lived that for 8 years. And because he was making so much money in his business, he's now worth about 200 million, okay? And I mean, he could buy the purest and the best cocaine out there. He told me all this. And he was spending between $3,000 and $10,000 a week on his habit. And would lost count how many women he was with. One thing he said to me, he rang me in 2015, Mr. Haddad, I need to catch up with you. Never heard from him again. 2016, he rang me again and we caught up. And he said, listen, you know what, Mr. Haddad, when I was doing all this for so long, one thing that was constant, your voice in the back of my head, reminding me that what I was doing is wrong. And also another teacher who taught at St. Charles, who was doing the same thing. Your voice and his voice were constantly in the back of my mind. Okay, so he knew it was right, and that platform was his hope. Because if he didn't have that, he would have despaired. So now he's drug-free and been that way for 5 years. Now he's looking to get married. He still has his enormous struggles, though. Right? So while your children live, there's hope. You had a question, and I'll give you a short answer.
So my question was about how do we encourage marriage to thrive at the later stage in life when the kids have moved out, empty nesters. There's a growing trend of great divorces.
Yes,
and I've moved out of home and I'm sort of, trying to encourage mum and dad to be best friends again. Do you have any advice around that?
But what can I say? Yeah, there's so many unfortunate trends, isn't it? These grey divorces. What next? You see, the fundamental problem there is that did these people ever believe in marriage as understood by Christianity? That what Christ taught, that marriage is lifelong and until death. If they really had that as a foundational belief from very young years, and they entered marriage with that view, we wouldn't be getting grey divorces. As for empty nesters, that's also a revolutionary departure from the Christian ideal. In the sense that, yeah, sure, your children marry, they move out. But where's the extended family, like catching up with your kids, catching up with your grandkids, and them catching up with you, and family gatherings and reunions? Where's that happening? I mean, we want to be so adult and so sophisticated. We want to be seen as better than that. Hold on, there's nothing better than that. Extended family and the life thereof, there's nothing better than that. Everything else is a fictional delusion that's sold to us.
When they get to a certain age, I mean, they've got so many other commitments. It's so hard. I mean, like we're in a situation where we've got grandchildren. No, our kids are married. But they've got so many other commitments. It's so hard just to get together. Even to celebrate a birthday.
Absolutely. Look, I don't have all the solutions, and I don't want to pretend that I am the solution, and I don't want to pretend that I'm living the solution. We're all weak, we're all small, and we all have our strengths and weaknesses. But I fortunately married someone who has a beautiful family. My in-laws and her brothers and their wives and their kids, and when we have family reunions, gosh, it's so huge. They couldn't fit in this room, right? I don't see anything in the world better than that for people who are aging. That's what our society has attacked, has demolished, and doesn't want to see resurrected. That's the great tragedy of our modern age. This individualism. I'm 14 now, got my Medicare card. Where's the contraception? Let's go. That's what's promoted today. All right. Thank you very much.
On that note, I'd ask you to join with me and thank Dr Robert Haddad for his very